When we speak about family, we often imagine warmth, laughter, and togetherness, but life has its way of testing those bonds. Sometimes the test comes not through conflict, but through silence. Not the silence of comfort, but the kind that grows when people who were once close begin to drift apart, pulled by years, pulled by miles, pulled by circumstances that neither side chose, yet both must live with. It is strange how time changes the texture of a relationship. Once, every detail of each other's life might have been shared: what was cooked in the kitchen, what the neighbor said, how the day felt, and now, those details are replaced by polite formalities, short messages, or worse, nothing at all. The bond is still there, like a bridge covered in mist, but the footsteps across it have grown rare. Distance, both physical and emotional, can sneak in so quietly that we hardly notice it at first. One person moves away for work, the other becomes busy with a new phase of life, and the phone calls become fewer, the visits less frequent. We tell ourselves it is temporary, that the love remains unchanged, that when we meet again, it will feel the same. But the truth is, time without connection alters the way we see each other. It's not about losing love, it's about losing the rhythm of understanding. And yet, even when years pass, there's a part of the heart that keeps a small room for the other. It might be quiet, it might be dusty, but it is there. The trouble is, unlocking that door again takes courage. It takes the willingness to face the possibility that the other person has changed in ways we might not be ready for. Sometimes the fear of disappointment keeps us apart even more than the miles between us. I remember looking out at a cold horizon once, feeling the sharp wind bite through layers of fabric, and realizing how much it resembled the space between two people who were once inseparable. It is not that the connection is gone, but that the warmth has to be rekindled. The question is always who will take the first step, who will say the first real word, not the casual greeting, but the one that admits, "I have missed you," or "I am sorry," or simply "I am here." Distance does not just measure geography. It measures the weight of unspoken words. The longer they remain unspoken, the heavier they become. We may carry them around, convincing ourselves that the right moment will appear, that one day we will say them with ease. But moments don't always arrive on their own sometimes. We have to create them. The hardest part is often accepting that the person we left behind in our memories is no longer the same. Time has carved its changes into them just as it has into us. They may think differently, look differently, speak differently. And yet, under all of that, the person we knew still exists. The trick is to speak in a way that allows that person to emerge again. It is a humbling thing to stand before someone you have not truly spoken to in years and try to find the right words. You might find your mouth dry, your thoughts tangled, your heart unsure if it should race with excitement or sink with regret. But then there is a moment, if you're lucky, when the eyes meet and something familiar flickers. In that instant, you remember why the bond was worth keeping in the first place. This is the quiet truth about family bonds strained by distance and time. They can bend, they can stretch, they can even seem invisible, but deep down, they are still there, waiting for someone to test their strength. And when that test comes, the first word spoken can be the rope that pulls two hearts back across the divide. There are moments in life when the weight of what we feel becomes so great that words seem almost impossible. It's not that we don't have anything to say, it's that the emotions have been stored away for so long, tangled and layered, that we can no longer find the thread to pull them free. We rehearse conversations in our heads, imagine the way we might begin, but when the time actually comes, the sentences we planned vanish, leaving us in a silence that feels heavier than any argument. It's a strange thing, holding on to feelings for years. In the beginning, you might think you'll share them soon. You tell yourself you're just waiting for the right moment, a time when the air feels lighter, when the distance between you is smaller, when the other person's heart might be more open. But days become months, months become years, and what was once a single unspoken thought grows into a forest of unsaid truths. And when you finally stand there, face to face, it's not only the other person you must confront, it's also the echo of every moment you stayed silent. Sometimes the difficulty isn't in admitting love or care. Those emotions, though deep, can be easier to express. The real challenge often lies in speaking of pain, disappointment, or regret without making it feel like blame. We fear that our honesty will be mistaken for accusation, that our attempt at connection will open an old wound instead of healing it. So we protect both ourselves and them by staying quiet. The trouble is, silence doesn't heal. It only preserves the hurt, keeping it fresh beneath the surface. We underestimate how powerful a single, honest sentence can be. A simple "I missed you" can dismantle walls that have stood for years. But to reach that point, you have to strip away pride, fear, and the belief that the other person should speak first. And that is where many of us falter. We wait for a signal, a gesture, a word from them, something that says it's safe to open up. Yet often, they are waiting for the same thing from us, and so both sides remain in a quiet standoff, the years ticking by in mutual hesitation. When the right words finally do come, they may not sound perfect. They might stumble out unevenly, hesitantly, like a child learning to walk. Your voice may shake, your throat may tighten, and you might feel foolish for how small the words seem compared to the emotions behind them. But those words, imperfect as they are, can be the key that unlocks everything, because it's not about eloquence, it's about sincerity. People don't remember if your sentences were well constructed, they remember if you meant them. I've stood in that space before, where my heart was loud, but my mouth was still, and I learned that the hardest part is not the speaking itself, it's the decision to speak. The moment you cross that invisible line between thought and voice, you begin to feel lighter. The person in front of you may not respond right away. They may even seem unsure how to receive what you've said, but the very act of saying it is a kind of freedom. Words can travel where touch cannot. They can cross oceans, survive years of silence, and reach into places in the heart that have been locked away. But they have to be spoken to have that power. Left unspoken, they remain trapped within us, slowly changing from gentle intentions into heavy regrets. And regret, once it takes root, is far harder to live with than the fear of speaking ever was. So when the moment comes and you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, that quiet voice urging you to finally say what has been waiting inside you for so long, listen to it. Speak before the opportunity slips away again. Speak before silence becomes the only language between you. Speak even if your voice trembles, because sometimes the smallest words are the ones that cross the widest divides. There is something remarkable about the way words, simple as they are, can reach into the deepest fractures between people and start to stitch them back together. They don't have to be grand speeches or poetic lines. Sometimes they are just a few plain sentences spoken with honesty. But when they are offered with an open heart, they can do what time, distance, and even good intentions alone could never manage. They can heal. When a relationship has been strained for a long time, it's easy to imagine that nothing could fix it. The gap feels too wide, the hurt too old, the misunderstandings too tangled. We begin to believe that silence is safer than trying, that avoiding certain topics or avoiding the person altogether will keep the peace. But peace built on avoidance isn't real peace. It's a pause, and like all pauses, it ends. That's when communication becomes not just helpful, but essential. The moment words are spoken, the right kind of words, the distance between two hearts begins to shrink. Not instantly, not magically, but gradually, like a thaw in winter. You can feel the frost breaking under the warmth of a sentence that acknowledges the truth. It might be something as gentle as "I understand now," or as brave as "I'm sorry." And it's not just the meaning of those words that matters, but the courage it takes to say them. That courage itself becomes part of the healing. What makes language so powerful is that it carries more than just meaning. It carries tone, intention, and presence. The way someone says, "I forgive you," or "I missed you," can reach into the listener's heart in a way that silent forgiveness or unspoken longing never could. When we hear the words aloud, we not only understand them with our minds, we feel them in our bones. Of course, speaking to heal isn't always easy. It requires stepping into vulnerability, risking the possibility that our words will not be received the way we hope. But without that risk, the wound remains. Think of all the misunderstandings that could have been mended if just one person had chosen to explain instead of assume, to ask instead of accuse, to admit instead of hide. That is the quiet power of language. It turns confrontation into conversation, and it gives people a way back to each other. I've seen moments when two people, separated by years of silence, finally begin to talk. At first, the words are cautious, almost fragile. There's a pause after each one, as though both are waiting to see if it will break the air or make it lighter. But slowly, the tension softens. Eyes begin to meet, voices steady, and the invisible wall that has stood between them for so long starts to dissolve. It is in those moments that you can see language working as a bridge, plank by plank, word by word. Healing through words doesn't always mean solving everything. Sometimes it's simply about opening a window that had been shut for too long, letting fresh air into a place that had grown stale with old feelings. It might not erase the past, but it changes the present, and often changing the present is what makes a different future possible. We live in a world where we are surrounded by ways to communicate messages, calls, letters, and endless screens. Yet the most powerful communication is still the oldest kind, looking someone in the eye and speaking from the heart. Because when we do that, we aren't just sending information, we are sending a piece of ourselves, an offering of connection that says, "I want to understand you," or "I want you to understand me." That is why the language we choose matters so deeply. It can wound or it can mend. It can push someone further away or draw them closer. And in moments when the gap feels unbridgeable, the right words can be the first stones laid across it. All it takes is the willingness to speak them. Because sometimes healing begins with nothing more than a voice, a moment, and the courage to let the words do their work. There are times when the world outside mirrors exactly what we feel inside, as if nature itself has decided to speak for us. The sky turns a shade of gray that feels heavier than usual, the kind that seems to press down on everything beneath it. The air carries a cold wind that cuts through layers, making you pull your coat tighter even though it still finds its way to your bones. And sometimes there's a strange color in the horizon, not the familiar gold of sunset, but something unusual, like a bleeding pink that you can't quite name. In those moments, it's as though the weather has taken on the shape of our emotions, giving them form in a language we can see and feel. The gray sky has a way of stripping the world of distraction. It quiets the colors, softens the edges, and leaves us alone with our thoughts. It isn't gloomy for the sake of gloom. It's honest, showing the rawness of what is there without trying to cover it with brightness. That honesty can be unsettling when you're carrying something heavy in your heart. It can feel as though the world is confirming what you already know, that this is a moment of stillness, a moment for facing what's been avoided. The cold wind, sharp and unyielding, can feel almost like a challenge. It asks you if you're ready to step forward despite the discomfort, if you can keep moving when every instinct says to retreat into warmth. In its own way, the wind strips away pretenses, reminding you that there is no shield against certain truths. You can wrap yourself in layers, but you'll still feel it. That's how some emotions are. No matter how much you try to cover them, they find their way in. And then there's that unusual sky color, the bleeding pink that doesn't belong to any season you've known. It's disorienting, almost unsettling, because it's neither entirely beautiful nor entirely ominous. It's something in between, something you can't quite classify. Maybe that's why it feels so personal, because emotions, too, are rarely simple enough to be labeled as one thing or another. They can be bittersweet, confusing, and beautiful all at once. Nature's symbols often speak more clearly than we can. A restless sea can stand in for the turmoil of an unresolved argument. A calm but overcast morning can hold the same quiet tension as two people sitting across from each other, unsure of how to begin speaking. We sense these parallels instinctively, even if we don't name them. The mind draws its own lines between the weather and the heart, as if trying to make sense of one by studying the other. I remember once standing at the edge of the water on a day like this, the air sharp, the sky heavy, the light strange. It felt as though the entire scene had been set to match the weight of the moment. Each gust of wind seemed to carry questions that had been left unasked for too long. Each shifting shade in the sky seemed to hold the possibility of change, if only the first step could be taken. That's the quiet gift of such days. They give you permission to feel everything fully. You don't have to pretend that everything is fine when the world outside is already carrying the weight for you. In that way, the weather becomes a companion, one that doesn't ask you to explain yourself but still understands. When words are hard to find, when emotions feel too tangled to untangle, it can be the sight of gray clouds rolling in, the sting of wind against your face, or the sight of a horizon painted in colors you've never seen before that finally makes you understand yourself a little better. Nature has its own way of holding a mirror up to the heart, showing us what we might not yet have the courage to say aloud. And sometimes that reflection is the first step towards speaking at all. There are journeys we take for practical reasons, to reach a destination, to fulfill an obligation, to see a place we've never seen before. And then there are journeys we take that are about more than where our feet land or where the road ends. These are the journeys that turn into something else entirely, becoming a bridge not just between two locations, but between two hearts that have been standing apart for too long. It often begins in silence. You pack your bag, you plan the route, you tell yourself it's just a trip, nothing more. The purpose seems straightforward: a visit, a meeting, a shared event. But beneath that, there's something unspoken, an awareness that this journey carries more weight than the map suggests. Each mile you travel feels like it's pulling you toward a moment you've been avoiding or longing for, or both at the same time. The road itself starts to reflect that tension. Maybe it's the way the air changes as you move, the way the scenery shifts from what is familiar to what feels foreign. Maybe it's the quiet hum of the engine or the rhythmic turning of the wheels beneath you that makes space for thoughts you haven't had time to face. With each passing landmark, you feel yourself crossing not only physical distance, but the space between the life you've been living and the moment you're heading toward. When the destination is someone you've grown distant from, the journey takes on an emotional weight. Every bend in the road, every mile marker, seems to hold a memory. You remember shared moments, old conversations, and the way things used to be. Sometimes those memories bring warmth, and sometimes they sting. The trip becomes a slow unfolding of all the reasons you are where you are now, and the possibility that things might change. There is something about moving through space that makes emotional movement feel more possible. A journey is a physical act of progress. You can see the distance shrinking, you can measure it. It's proof that change can happen, even if only one step at a time. And perhaps without realizing it, that physical momentum starts to carry you emotionally as well. When you finally arrive, it's not just your body that has traveled, your mind and heart have too. The act of getting there, of making the effort, says something on its own. It's a silent statement, I cared enough to come. And that unspoken message can be more powerful than the first words exchanged. I felt that moment, stepping into a place where I knew the air would be thick with unspoken history. The first sight of the other person after so long carried a weight that was both heavy and light, heavy with all the time lost, light with the relief of finally being there. The ground between us wasn't just the floor of a room or the deck of a boat or the shore of a lake. It was a bridge built by the journey itself. Sometimes the trip isn't smooth. There might be delays, storms, or wrong turns along the way. But those obstacles only make the arrival more meaningful. They become part of the story you carry into the meeting, proof that even when the path wasn't easy, you kept moving forward. The journey doesn't end when you arrive. In a way, it's only the beginning, because now the real crossing begins, the crossing of emotional distance, the rebuilding of a connection that has been worn thin. But it's easier to take those first steps when you've already traveled so far to be there. The miles you've covered become a quiet encouragement. If you could make it here, maybe you can make it back to each other. And sometimes that bridge built by a journey is strong enough to hold the weight of everything that comes next. Language is more than a set of rules and definitions. It is a living thing that carries emotion, memory, and meaning. When we learn a new language, it is tempting to focus only on grammar charts, word lists, and exercises, but those alone cannot give us the full experience of connection. Words are meant to be lived in, not just studied, and one of the most powerful ways to live in them is through stories that make us feel something. A heartfelt narrative has a way of doing what no textbook can. It takes us into another person's world and lets us see through their eyes, hear through their ears, and feel through their heart. In that space, new vocabulary stops being abstract and starts becoming part of lived experience. When you hear a word in the middle of a moving scene, you don't just learn its meaning, you remember the way it was spoken, the tone, the expression on the speaker's face. It becomes more than a definition, it becomes a memory. Learning English through a story about love, distance, forgiveness, or reunion engages both the mind and the heart. You aren't just translating phrases. You are following a journey, anticipating what might happen next, sensing the emotions behind the words. This natural engagement makes learning smoother. The brain remembers more easily when information is connected to emotion, and stories are full of emotions that linger long after the final sentence. Even small details in a story can teach more than you expect. The way a character describes a gray sky, a cold wind, or a strange color at sunset adds new descriptive vocabulary to your mind without you even realizing you are studying. You learn not just the words themselves, but how to weave them together so they create an image. This is the difference between knowing a language and knowing how to use it beautifully. The rhythm of a narrative also helps with comprehension practice. Stories naturally repeat certain words or phrases, not in a mechanical way, but in a way that reinforces them through context. A character's name, a recurring object, or a repeated emotion gives you multiple chances to encounter the same vocabulary in different settings. Over time, those words settle into your understanding, ready to be used when you need them. And there's another layer. Listening to the flow of a story can sharpen your sense of how English sounds when it's alive. The pauses, the emphasis, the way certain syllables rise or fall, these are details you can only pick up when language is wrapped in emotion. Reading and listening to heartfelt stories teaches you not only what to say, but how to say it in a way that feels natural. A heartfelt story also invites you to imagine yourself in it. You might picture the characters' faces, the place they are in, the choices they must make. This act of imagining strengthens comprehension because you are actively engaging with the text rather than passively receiving it. You ask yourself, what would I do in that moment? How would I say those words if they were mine? That inner dialogue is where language practice becomes deeply personal. The beauty of this kind of learning is that it doesn't feel like study in the traditional sense. You are not counting correct answers or ticking off grammar points. You are experiencing something. And yet, when the story ends, you find that your vocabulary has grown, your understanding has deepened, and your ability to express yourself has expanded. It is learning that stays with you because it was carried on the current of emotion. In the end, language is at its most powerful when it is used to tell the truths of the heart. And when you learn it in that form through narratives that make you care, that make you think, that make you feel you are not just memorizing English, you are inhabiting it. No distance is too great, no silence too deep when we choose to speak from the heart. Every step, every word, every shared moment becomes a bridge back to what matters most. And through stories, we learn not only a language, but the timeless art of truly understanding one another.